I mean, I know how this news lands for me. It shatters me. I always put myself in this position of, would I think that I could get slaughtered if I went and asked somebody to turn the music down, or in this case, stop shooting their weapon? And I wouldn't, but now I will.
Nicole, Jamie would be 20 in July. So I look at things now in the context of what Jamie's life should be. 20 years ago, in 2003, there were 200 million weapons in America. We've more than doubled. There's now over 400 million. 20 years ago, in 2003, AR-15s were fewer than 2% of all guns sold. They're now 25%. Those are the only two things you need to know about why a shooting like this happens. Those are the only things you need to understand. It's not immigration status. That just tells you who Greg Abbott is. In fact, that shooting in Texas has more to do with Greg Abbott and his policy than anything else. But you're right to be fearful, okay? Because in 20 years, we have changed America because of the numbers of guns. That's all you need to know. The question is, how did we get here?
What's the answer?
For far too long, really starting in 1977, we listened to a lobby that started lying. In 1977, the NRA was taken over by a guy, Harlan Carter. And what people didn't know about Harlan Carter at the time is he was a convicted murderer, but he changed a vowel in his name. And he redirected the NRA, and through the 80s and the 90s, started pushing the NRA into a far different direction. And you really saw the consequences of that happening around 2000. In fact, it was 2005 where the first Stand Your Ground law was passed. And we have seen now since 2000 weakening of law after law after law because of all the lies they told us. I want America to know this. America in its history is a country that has supported gun safety. This is not who we are. This is a relatively new shift. And we're now paying the price in blood of those we love that we need to bury. But it doesn't have to be this way. And I'll just say this. Greg Abbott and all the others like him, if voting didn't matter to you before, if you didn't think you had the perfect candidate, he just showed you today why you need to vote for the person who wants to reduce gun violence no matter what.
I'm going to read from Steve Kerr's foreword because it makes a point so beautifully that I've tried to get at. But the persuading of the public is done. You've got a majority of gun owners who want gun safety legislation. You've got 85% of the public who wants background checks. And I think this issue may reflect just how broken our politics are that nothing happens.
Today, I think it was today, Nikki Haley put out a photo, like she's playing dress up, and like the obligatory Republican candidate photo of her dressed up with this huge rifle. For what? For what? I don't think our politics are broken. I think we've elected a class of people, though, who have such a low regard for voters and for those who vote, or maybe correctly assume the majority of us won't vote, that we're electing broken people who are making decisions like this. And so my message to America is you solve this by voting.
I think that people are focused on this in a way this year than maybe never before. I think to see a dispute between neighbors end in a massacre, to see someone getting in the wrong car, and two high school cheerleaders to get shot in a parking lot, to see neighbors ringing the wrong doorbell, you get shot, to see lives shattered in interactions that we all have as we go about our lives. I got in the wrong Uber and I jumped in a way that I might not have if I hadn't covered all these stories this year. What is happening to us?
Yeah.
You want to jump in?
You know, historically, one of the things we touch on in the American Carnage book is there was the view that gun violence happened over there somewhere.
Right.
And often that was the inner city, and there was coded language, in other words, people of color. So if I wasn't a person of color, didn't live in a city, I didn't have to worry. And now with these incidents, clearly we're seeing that across every demographic group, across any size of community, you make one slip, one mistake, and you can literally be shot. And you asked, Nicole, why is this happening? Well, we believe that over the last 40 years, the gun lobbies waged what we call a disinformation campaign, trying to convince Americans that they're safer in their homes and safer carrying a gun out in public. And nothing can be further from the truth. But there are real-world consequences because some Americans have bought that message, and we're seeing, compared to 20 years ago when Jamie was born, we're seeing 5 times as many Americans carrying guns daily outside. It's still a minority, but they're carrying guns. And 40% of gun owners are keeping guns loaded and accessible in the home. So that's changed, because in the past, America had a history of gun ownership, but people would lock up their guns and go hunting and so forth. But now guns are being primarily bought for personal protection, so they're handled differently and handled dangerously in the home. So
where's the disinformation coming from, and where is it amplified?
Well, I think that its disinformation largely came from, of course, National Rifle Association and the industry, but it's being hugely amplified on social media. And we see it every day, Fred and I, in terms of our tweets and the type of hostile comments that you get. But we're also seeing that the vast majority of people seem to be supportive of our message. And as you mentioned, no less than Fox News conducted this poll that showed that 80% or more of Americans now support red flag laws, background checks, raising the age for gun purchasing. So they're becoming more favorable. So another myth, which we also talk about, is that the country is hopelessly broken. And people tell us all the time, you're preaching to the converted. And, others, you're never going to convince. Whereas we know in politics, about 40% of Americans are independent. And in fact, there are groups now of gun owners and non-owners getting together, trying to develop some solutions they can live with. Because most gun owners are supportive of the type of basic types of laws that most of us are seeking.
And most legal gun owners have gone through background checks themselves.
Right. Can I add one thing to who's amplifying it? Too many of those who we've elected, because too many of us don't vote. And all you need to do is look at a tweet like what came out from Greg Abbott today or Rick Scott, where they didn't even acknowledge. So they talked about the immigration status. Neither one of them said, how in the world did this guy actually get the AR-15? Okay, so they amplify it with their words and actions. If you go back just to last month to the shooting in Tennessee, nobody wanted to talk about the gun on the other side. You know what they wanted to talk about? Transgender, okay? Had nothing to do with it, okay? But they are the ones out there telling all these lies, the lies around the need for personal protection, the lies around this is who we are as Americans. No, we're not. In 20 years, we've doubled the number of weapons. That's why we're in this position today.
Well, and as you know better than anybody, there aren't any more places that are immune from the national crisis.
No.
Our schools can be targeted. To be the governor of a state with Uvalde and respond the way he did was even more shocking. And to see some of Jamie's classmates become political piñatas and targeted, what is that like for you?
Listen, I accept that there are evil people. Unfortunately, some of them are also elected to serve. I'm amazed by these kids who, maybe because of what they lived through, are completely unaffected by the morons that serve right now.
They're almost like inspired to keep going, where I find it just...
They're basically like, listen, I lived through a school shooting. I heard the shots. I had to walk through the carnage. You can't hurt me with your stupidity. I'm going to keep coming because I want to stop the next one. And you know what? Those kids, Tom and me, never forget this. Our motivation is really simple: stopping the next one. Their motivation, people like Greg Abbott and those who push a different narrative, their motivation is selling the next one. That's what makes us different.
What would Jamie think of this book?
I think Jamie would be really proud of her dad. You know, listen, my daughter was a fighter. My daughter got right from wrong. My daughter stood up for others, and my daughter spent her time with people who also stood up for others, kind of the way I'm collaborating with Tom now. And my daughter was shy if she didn't know people. So there's a part of me that thinks she would hide from all of this. But
except when she was dancing.
And when she knew you. You know, I always say, you know, Jamie was the energy in every room that she walked into because she was comfortable with her people. Nicole, in my house, Jamie was the one, like me, who got really engaged in politics and the news. And I have no doubt in my mind, had she not been killed that day, she'd be one of those kids fighting for change.